won't find the phantom. He finds you.
G'day, this is X-Band The Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast app. Please do not forget to give us a rating so others can find us. Some fans will know that we have reviews of all the Mad Cave Studio Defenders of the Earth series up on our YouTube channel and website. But we wanted to conduct a mini-series of our own with the whole team. Plus, we didn't really get a chance to review them, so team like Dan, myself, and Steve kind of felt a little bit left out, so we wanted to have our say as well. So today we have the team in myself, Stephen, Dan, as well as Scott, who will join us for his first podcast with us. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Well, quick intro. So for those who haven't seen, you've been reading The Phantom for how long?
Oh gosh. I'm not gonna do the math on that, but I really started when Moonstone first picked it up. That's about what, like 20-ish years now, something like that. So that's my real first introduction in comic book form. I actually was introduced to the Phantom through the Billy Zane movie in the 90s.
Awesome. And for those who haven't seen your reviews, if they want to find out a little bit more about you, your website and your Instagram handle.
Oh, my website is scottwaldenwrites.com, and then my Instagram threads handle is just writer_Scott. So easy to find.
Awesome. And I'm not sure about the other guys, but I've really been enjoying your reviews for Mad Cave for the Defenders of the Earth series, which we're going to do a little mid-term review now, and looking forward to your Moonstone ones and the next Mad Cave ongoing Phantom series reviews as well. So thank you for those as well.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, 100%. Your video reviews are excellent, Scott. Really appreciating those. I do make sure I try and read the book myself before I watch your review. I will say that. So I'm not watching it at the moment it comes out. But yeah, really enjoying your take on the series.
Well, thanks. Thank you. And like that makes sense too, because it's kind of hard at this point to like review it without having to touch on all the threads that I know we're going to get into shortly.
I'm assuming not everyone on this podcast is up to date. So Steve is going to give us a short reading so everyone can be kind of caught up to date. And during this podcast, we're going to be flicking through the comics. Over to you, Steve.
The year is 2020, and instead of a pandemic, the defenders of the Earth are battling Ming's ice robots. It is the final day of Earth's war with Mongo, and things aren't looking good. And when the Phantom gets shot in the back after going back for Mandrake's hat, things look very grim indeed. Then, just as it looks like Lothar's about to breathe his last, the ice robots freeze, and through the smoke and rubble tumbles the head of Ming the Merciless, followed by Flash Gordon, striding through with laser sword ablaze. And so begins Mad Cave Studios' publication of the latest Defenders of the Earth adventure. We then pick up the story 4 years later, and the Earth seems to have recovered well. A rebuild that experts thought would take 20 years has been done in under 5, very much in thanks to Baron Atomics, which has been provided to the Earth by Ming's son, Crotown. Mandrake, Phantom, and Lothar seem skeptical of Crotown's intentions. Flash Gordon has his own battles to contend with, the battles of corporate bureaucracy and the struggle to keep his work-life balance in check. While the Phantom is still in the US, recovering from his injuries from the war, his mind often wanders back to his homeland of Bengali. News is reaching him that the Ghost Who Walks has returned. Can it be Jeddah taking up the mantle that her father has seemingly left behind? Or could someone else be abusing the title that has meant justice and peace for 500 years? The defenders then go off on their own separate ways. Lothar and Alj to the Seven Nations, Flash to his office, and Mandrake hits the stage with the Phantom in the wings. Though it seems that Mandrake is only interested in his name being up in lights again, it is just an illusion, as he has been using his stage shows as a cover to gain information from the underground about what is happening in the world, which is great, as Flash Gordon, as well as the rest of the world, doesn't seem to notice. Is it that he, and they, don't notice, or is their attention intentionally diverted elsewhere? Even when taken to Ice Station Earth, Crotown's Earth base here, he, as well as Kashin, can't seem to see what is right in front of them. Rick Gordon, however, is far more observant and his curiosity grows even deeper when he sees a few familiar faces. Back in the Seven Nations, Lothar and Aljac confront Kurt Walker, the brother of the Phantom, who has taken up the title and is leading a terrible vengeance to reign upon the Singh Brotherhood and taking Jeddah along for the ride. Has Jeddah been seduced by Kurt to believe that what he is doing is right because she only sees the people that they're helping, not the wake of blood that he's leaving behind? Why can't the true Phantom go back to his homeland and put an end to this bloodshed? He seems to have become a mere ghost, haunting roughnecks in alleyways. The Phantom feels at a loss with what he has become and is led to the Council of Phantoms, where all phantoms of generations past sit. The first Phantom leads discussions and is impressed with Kurt's inroads to finally put an end to the Singh Brotherhood, no matter the cost. The cool head of the Phantom's father prevails, and our Phantom leaves the council shaken but ready to follow Mandrake's lead, especially as news has reached him that Rick has been attacked. It seems that Flash Gordon can only be distracted for so long. When a blatant attack is blasted upon his son, the true Flash Gordon rises to the occasion. But why the attack on Rick? What has he stumbled upon? Is it Crotan who has sent his ice soldiers to silence Rick? Or could it be Crotan's sister, the Princess Castra, who has been working as Flash Gordon's PA for some time, ensuring that his attention is always on the rebuilding of the planet Earth? But how did Flash know about the attack on his son? He did try calling Rick's landline, and he didn't pick up. But then Gordon gets a message from Rick alerting him, and he's there in a flash. But Rick is in no position to send a message. Do the Defenders of the Earth have an ally in the machine? Someone who can support them to finally crash this system of injustice? Well, they're going to need to work fast, because even though Rick and Flash have made it to the sanctuary of Xanadu, where Mandrake and Phantom are, the Ice Soldiers and Mongo jets are hot on their heels. If only they had a rocket to outrun them with, something that didn't rely on barren atomics, a real blast from the past. Maybe something built by Professor Zarkov would do just nicely.
Steve, Dan, I'd love to hear kind of like your thoughts on what you're thinking of the series so far after 4 issues.
Yeah, after reading the 4 issues so far, I thought, if you're a Flash Gordon fan, this is all right. If you're a Phantom fan, there's a few things that don't sit well. That's my first reaction.
That makes complete sense to me. I guess there's a lot of this where I'd be if I'm tweeting about it, I'm putting on the hashtag not my Phantom, because there's a lot of queries I've got about the way that they're treating the character. I like a lot of his witty one-liners and the way that they've written his dialogue, but the actual story arc for the Phantom, I'm struggling with a little bit. Looking forward to seeing how it finishes out in the second half of the series, I suppose.
I think that's totally fair. Coming at it from the Phantom perspective, it makes it really difficult to glean what you like or dislike about it, because, even the cover of each book has the "From the World of Flash Gordon" just plastered right on the cover there. So, it definitely has that Flash Gordon centric focus. I mean, I feel like Rick Gordon is really the primary character in all this. We see him a lot, which for listeners, that's the son of Flash Gordon.
He seems to be the lynch point to the narrative. That everything's surrounding him.
Which is interesting, because in the original Defenders of the Earth, Rick Gordon was actually originally Kit Walker. So the Phantom had a son and Flash Gordon had a daughter. So it's interesting how that was kind of flipped after the consultants got involved. I have to give props to Dan that I think he's studied Dan the writer. Not Dan, our podcast guest.
Yeah. Our Dan was just thinking, oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah. About time there, Jane.
I think he's studied, and I think he understands the Phantom, but I think he doesn't understand the essence of the Phantom. Like, I think he understands, that, one of the discussions we had before was, and we'll get into the Council of the Phantoms in a second, but we counted how many Phantoms are in there, and there's the right number of Phantoms. There's 26 Phantoms. The Defenders of the Earth Phantom is the 27th Phantom. So, he's got those type of things correct, which is good. But he doesn't seem to understand the essence. And when I say the essence, who the Phantom is, the Phantom's not your average American superhero, if that kind of makes sense. He's totally different from a Batman or something like that. Does that kind of make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that's something, at least, from the Phantom stuff I've read like I read the ones over in the Americas, so like the DC ones and then Moonstone. The tone and angle of this Phantom feels very different from those that I've been experienced to. He feels even more emotional in a way too, a little more, and maybe that's just because it's the trying to make that darker, edgier type of comic book vibe in the context of this like grown up kids cartoon from the 80s.
I think he's always emotional, but they lean a lot, or they lean heavily on the more anger and the more also almost self-loathing. Yeah, actually, I won't say almost. I'll say no. There is a bit of self-loathing going on there. Missing the fella behind the door, getting stabbed in the back, and a few things not going his way. And then the Council of Phantoms, they're just absolutely frustrated, until a cooler head prevailed, which I think I mentioned earlier was his old man. But yeah, it's interesting to see where this is going.
What you say about not being a typical American superhero makes sense, but I guess for the conceit that the Phantom was injured back at the end of and has since spent the last 4 years recuperating in Mandrake's house. Obviously, we find out why he can't leave Mandrake's house as well. And so the frustration that, he's the Phantom, he belongs in the deep woods and helping out in the jungle, but then also all around the world. But now he's basically in almost house arrest as he as he's a ghost, literally a ghost. I can understand the human frustration and emotion and self-loathing that would come out of that situation. So I guess it works for the plot points that DiDio's used. And I guess when you put it into that context, it makes sense, but still, whether it works overall, I guess remains to be seen.
You made mention of the Phantom basically being a ghost who walks, pun intended. So what are your guys' thoughts about that story development, about the fact that the Phantom has actually died and now he is a ghost who walks?
I don't mind that little play. I thought, that's interesting. See how that goes. But is he dead? What's going on here? There's some sort of wonderful magic that Mandrake's conjured up. I'm sure we're going to find out what's going to happen there, because Mandrake says, I can't tell you, otherwise then the magic ceases to happen. So I reckon that's just planting a seed, saying, all right, we're going to find this out later down the line. Maybe that the mantle will go off to Jeddah and she'll do the right thing as the Phantom passes. But I don't mind that the literal ghost who walks element. I think, oh yeah, that's a nice little twist. I can do with it with this, offshoot Defenders of the Earth series, not in my main series Phantom.
I have a question though. Like, the Phantom can't leave the mansion, but didn't he leave the mansion when Mandrake started going on the show, which was in issue 2, I believe it was?
Can't wander too far from the mansion, can't leave Mandrake.
Okay, so as long as he's either with either the mansion or Mandrake, is that the loophole with that?
I think that's the loophole.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm well and truly on the record of saying that I'm not a big fan of the supernatural in my Phantom stories. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons why, again, hashtag not my Phantom. As Steve says, if it sticks with Defenders of the Earth and doesn't come into the main series, it's an interesting twist. And I guess we can talk later about Mad Cave's Phantom standalone series, which we're looking forward to coming out in mid-2025. But I would certainly hope they don't take that idea into that standalone series and it sticks with this from the world of Flash Gordon, as you've said, Scott.
I guess I'm struggling with what's the point of him being a ghost, like the literal ghost who walks. They haven't explained that yet, like why this matters, how it's going to really affect the story, other than it's just keeping Phantom out of it and he's not really doing anything. And so that's kind of where I'm stuck. And until, we have a good reason or some kind of beat there behind it that goes, this is important, then, until then, it's just not something that's really working for me necessarily. And then I also think about it in the frame of, I think it was like issue 1 where they made a one-off line in some line of dialogue about the power of 10 tigers or whatever. You had that comment and it's kind of like a little nod, maybe a little joke at like something from the cartoon series and maybe a little bit of silliness there. And then here we are where the Phantom is like a ghost, and there's just, I guess it just doesn't jive with me because I don't understand the why. It all comes back to.
It's interesting when he does say the calling on the strength of 10 tigers, that's when he gets shot. And so it's like it's putting a full stop to the night. We're not the cartoon series, we are our own thing, and we're moving on from that.
I will say I'm not a fan of the 10 tigers magic power. It kind of reminds me a bit of He-Man, where by the power of
Grayskull.
Grayskull. It kind of reminds me a bit of that. I used to joke that, Stan Lee couldn't create any characters without superpowers. So, when he got given the gig of writing Defenders of the Earth, he didn't know how to handle the Phantom, so he had to give him a magical power. But I usually offend people when I made comments like that.
Before we leave the Tigers, it does look cool in a jumper.
Nice.
Does make a cool jumper.
It does. So the Council of Phantoms, we've kind of danced around the edge of it a couple of times already. Dan, we'll start off with you because we know this is not your Phantom. What's your opinion of the Council of Phantoms? Like, do you have any issues with it? Can you see a purpose of it or anything like that?
It's an interesting take on using the chronology of the Phantom and the descendant aspect of this character. We've seen in the past similar sorts of things, which I guess have worked sometimes and haven't worked at other times. Scott, you mentioned the Billy Zane movie. I really didn't probably quite gel to Billy Zane Kit in that movie talking to his dead dad, and this has those sorts of overtones, I guess. There are certainly plenty of times where we've seen the Phantom go into the crypt where all of his forebears are buried and have a conversation with himself or a meditation, and we see echoes of past Phantoms around him. And I've always accepted that because that's just, him thinking what these other Phantoms might say to him. An actual council of Phantoms where you walk in and there's these, in this instance, 26 Phantoms there spruiking their opinion on what he should or shouldn't do, and actually being quite judgmental. Yes, your point there earlier, Scott, about the why. What's the purpose of this? How does it fit? At the moment, it seems to have been just so that they could all have a crack at the Phantom and say he's not doing a good enough job. And beyond that, what's their purpose so far? So on the fence about it, it certainly makes for a cool picture with all of those Phantoms sitting around in the council chambers.
Now, I've got a theory behind it because I'm very much like you. I'm on the fence. Like, I want to like this series. I want to see the Phantom succeed in America, and I think we all do. I want Mad Cave, I want Moonstone to be able to produce good quality Phantom stories. I have my concerns about the essence of the Phantom, but that might just be because I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I've now reached 40. I'm now one of the grey-haired old farts who it's hashtag not my Phantom. I have a theory that maybe the reason, the way that the past Phantoms are behaving like snobs, male jerks, chauvinistic pigs, whatever you want to call them, maybe the whole Council of the Phantom is Mandrake pulling a Swifty on our Phantom, because it almost feels like once he's had that chat with the Phantom, with the Council of the Phantoms, he actually wants to do something now. He wants to leave the comfort of the mansion. He wants to go and confront his brother. He wants to get his daughter back. So maybe Mandrake has done some magical little illusions, which we know he's good at, to kind of put a burr under the saddle of the Phantom to get him all agitated so he wants to be the Phantom again. That's the only way I can see this is kind of working, because you're right. When I read the conversations between the first Phantom and all these other Phantoms, that's not the Phantoms that I've read in the Chronicles, that I've read, in my free comic, that I've read in, by Lee Falk, by Tony DePaul, by what Egmont has done. That's not those Phantoms. So that's me hoping that Dan the writer is pulling a Swifty on us. He's using that as an avenue for the Phantom to grow some and get back on the horse.
What do you think, Scott? You said before that your main Phantom is the Moonstone and the American stuff. How do you feel about that?
I don't really know what to make of it, just because the council scene was so brief. And, it could be an illusion. It was in Mandrake's root cellar, where all this was taking place. But it's really hard to say because, it is a catalyst for something else. But, it just kind of appeared out of nowhere, I felt like. We had that scene and then we moved on from it. And at the same token, though, I feel like that's kind of indicative of the series as a whole, where there's just a lot of beats that don't feel connected. So it's hard to say that I have an opinion on the counselor or not. It was a great visual. I do agree with that. I liked seeing that. I thought it was really cool, a lot of nice artistic design. But as to what it means or, how I gel with those Phantom incarnations, I need more.
And you're touching on what a problem with a series like this. There's four main characters in the Phantom, Flash Gordon, Lothar, and Mandrake. Then you got their offspring, LJ, Kashin, or Kashin's an offspring, you got the idea, Rick and Jeddah. There's a lot, plus you got the bad guys to to make sure we get them in as well. There is a lot going on, and you can only really touch on little bits at a time, and hopefully those loose ends that we've mentioned a few times do get picked up again. Like with the council, there is another loose end there. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up again later.
I was gonna say, it seemed like the council, like the one thing they really did do plot wise was just kind of show their support, or basically kind of explain away why we have Kurt Walker as the Phantom. There was just that, you know, he's following the protocol better than you did, and so that's kind of our reason for him just walking around being the Phantom right now.
He's not following the protocols, but he's gone. And I reckon the first Phantom is just kind of taking himself as absolute rule of the council, and no one else is saying anything. He's just, what my way is the highway. He's been very Machiavellian about it all. All of a sudden, to stop the Sing pirates, you use any means necessary, and that's never been the Phantom's MO. And that's what I really have an issue with.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Steve. The whole Kurt as the Phantom, and then leading Jeddah down the wrong path as well. That is 100% a loose end that needs to be sewn up, and I don't care what the Council of Phantoms say. That's, again, hashtag not my Phantom.
Playing devil's advocate here, like, I agree, it's not the 21st Phantom that we have all read and loved. That's our Phantom, the 21st Phantom. But the first Phantom had to be kind of not deranged, but there had to be some issues with him because he was shipwrecked in another continent, not another country, in another continent back in the 1500s, which is totally, it's not like, we can fly to Africa now and we can go to another continent, but 1500s, that's another world away, that's another universe away back. Saw his dad brutally murdered in front of him, to then be able to say, I'm going to get revenge. And then once he got revenge, then continue down that path for all his kids, bring his wife and stuff like that. There has to be some mental issues there for the first Phantom. Do we see the first Phantom with rose-tinted glasses a little bit? I'm just trying to provide maybe an alternative view that maybe the first Phantom was not as saintly as what we kind of look back and think he was.
I can see how that makes sense, Germ. Like, as you say, in the context of, someone who's gone through that traumatic incident and then swears to spend their life not seeking revenge necessarily, but yes, on the other hand, devoting their life to stamping out piracy, cruelty, all that sort of stuff. Context of the 1500s and someone who's been through that traumatic experience, there probably is going to be some violence and some by any means necessary type attitude, and maybe that has been diluted and changed over the years to the Phantom the 21st Phantom, that, as you said, that is our Phantom sort of thing. So I can see that makes sense, but I guess it's just been done in 2 or 3 captions without all of that backstory, and without actually making us the general reader aware that that's what you're doing.
It's very confrontal when you read that and you go, oh, crikey, the way he's talking. And especially when he talks about, like, it is my sons and their sons and their sons. It doesn't mention daughters or descendants. Ironically, we actually had a recent discussion with a writer recently where we made mention that they was talking about doing a telling of the oath in a possible future story. We made the mention of that we would like it to be descendants instead of sons and their sons. And it was kind of ironic because that was something we talked about, and then Mad Cave, Dan and the team actually kind of made that point as well in their story.
That's because I'm in the 2024s and I'm totally woke about things now, Germ.
He's got 2 daughters.
Yeah, he's got 2 daughters like I do as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe Dan DiDio with his writing history and Mad Cave, and it's an American series and all the rest of it. It's a gritty reality of what this character could have been and the way that that's evolved. So it does make sense the way that you laid it out there a moment ago. But as I said, it was done so quickly and in just a couple of frames that maybe that didn't land as well as it might have.
It's really a way to place the Phantom, the current Phantom, against the old fuddy-duddy Phantoms and say this is the new. We're not stuck in the old, in the 1500s where they're all stuck in their ways and it's all male dominant. We're now in the new Phantom, and in Descendants, Jeddah should be allowed to take it. So that's part of the argument between the Defenders of the Earth Phantom and the Council. Which is interesting because I would have thought Phantom 21 would pipe up around about there too. Where's Heloise?
No, was it the 16th who had twins as well? Team Phantom and Moonstone and even Frill as well, they've really pushed Julie as an equal when it comes to the Phantom. You know, they've created their own stories. You've got then in several stories, you've got Flame, who was the wife of the ninth or 10th Phantom. She actually became the Phantom for a while. Diana's become the Phantom in a couple of stories by Lee Falk and stuff like that as well. Sometimes they can pick up the role and be just as good. Scott, anything you want to add?
No, not really. I think I'm kind of in agreement on here. I'm cool with Descendants, and I do think it's also a way, like you guys mentioned already, that creates that distance between the old and the new, and it probably creates more of an open playing field for them if they want to continue this series or pick it up or go further in different directions without having to tether it to it by kind of forging that gap there.
That's the reason why I think that it might be Mandrake pulling an illusion on the Phantom and the readers, is because it doesn't seem Phantom-like. Well, either that or Dan's totally missed the essence of the Phantom. When we were chatting about this before, the chat in a bit of a private chat before, someone made mention that the Defenders of the Earth Phantom is the 27th, Kurt is the 28th. If the 27th Phantom becomes the Phantom again, will that make him the 27th or the 29th Phantom? I just thought that was an interesting question. Anything you want to add about that?
I do remember reading in this that there was a Donald Trump reference. So, Scott, where do you go with this one?
Well, Donald Trump was the 45th and is about to be the 47th president. So I guess if you take that precedent, then the Ghost Phantom in this Defenders of the Earth series is going to be the 27th, and we hope maybe the 29th or the 30th, even if Jeddah somehow slips in there. God only knows what's happening. They're all in existence at the same time. So who knows?
Yeah,
Is there a rule about having a living, breathing body, though, first? I think we have to solve that one.
That's not a body somewhere. Biden, is it, Scott?
Well, wow, I did not think we were going to get into US politics in this podcast. And raised not by the American either.
I'm trying to hide from it, okay?
That's why he's out in space. Get away from me.
You can come to Australia, we'll have you. Again, if you're on YouTube, you will see a lot of these key elements as we're talking about and flash up on the screen. Steve, you made mention of the thing that the Phantom needs to be near the mansion and Mandrake. I must admit, I missed that when I read that. Shrinking the mansion, and in issue 4, where he like literally folds it up like a deck of cards and slips it in his pocket. Now, was that a clever way to kind of get around the Phantom's quandary, or is that just kind of convenient? Like, what are your thoughts about that development?
Mandrake's a get out of jail free card. He is very overpowered, and if you get yourself into a problem, Mandrake's magic and you can fix it.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of that was a cop out. I would agree with that get out of jail free card, because doesn't seem like there's limitations on Mandrake. He could kind of do anything. They haven't established what the rules are. And just to kind of look at like other comic book magic users, on Marvel you have Doctor Strange and he needs to like eat a certain amount. There is like an energy level to his powers. He can do almost anything, but they have books where like he constantly has to eat weird stuff to maintain that power. And with Mandrake, it doesn't seem like we have those same confinements or rules. And so, we established in one issue, Phantom's literally a ghost. And then in the next issue, that whole tether to, well, I can't really go anywhere. I'm kind of stuck to you. I can't help and fight is fixed in just a couple panels there. So that is probably the thing I feel like is the weakest about this series, is because then it makes everything that came before kind of feel a little, not necessarily pointless. I feel like that's a harsh word, but it does lessen the impact of all the stuff we're seeing with the character that, we're all here to see more of in this book. And, he's barely in it to begin with.
Oh, I think he's in it a bit. Like, we haven't mentioned anything much about Lothar. He's getting the rough end of the stick.
Yeah.
He's been shipped off to Africa real quick and dealing with stuff over there, and we don't see much of him.
The one thing I did like about Xanadu getting folded up and put in Mandrake's pocket was it did lead to a really nice piece of Phantom dialogue where Mandrake sits down in the rocket ship and says, "See, I told you I'd solve the problem." And Phantom says, "Well, you're still not getting the window seat." I like it.
And anyone with kids realize that is a consistent squabble with them. There is some humor in the series which I do like. I will take my hat off to Dan the writer, that just those subtle little hints just kind of break up a lot of the seriousness. Do we like the grittiness of it though?
Yeah,
We'll
I
see
think
how.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm gonna see what happens by issue 8
Mm.
because gritty is good, but there's something to be said for wholesome.
Yeah.
But speaking of wholesome, what a wholesome moment it was when Zuffy returned.
You like Zuffy's return?
Oh, good old Zuffy. I mean, Rick needed it. Rick was feeling real down. He'd been missing his old man, and it's been a couple of years since his mother died, and his dad seems to be ignoring him. And then all of a sudden, there's Zuffy, and everything seemed to be nice, and he was able to get his head up and make some moves and do some really good stuff.
I do think that Zuffy probably holds a weird, odd spot in the hearts of fandom fans because he appeared in the action figure play set for some reason, been connected to the fandom that way. But if you want to talk about getting gritty and real, suddenly Zuffy goes wild in the fourth issue, and yeah, attacks in a way that I've not ever seen Zuffy do before.
Yeah, I don't remember that ever happening in the cartoon. Go Zuffy.
He was a lot cuter at the time.
You made mention of Zuffy being in the NECA figurines. It is worth listening
where
to the
is he?
podcast that we had with George Djokovic, who actually designed it. And he actually made mention about why Zuffy was included in that figurine set. And he really, really liked Zuffy. So I'm sure he's enjoyed seeing Zuffy as well. I wonder if Zuffy's going to get his own little alternative cover. Those ones with the NECA figurines are actually done by George Djokovic, so it'll be interesting to see whether he gets an issue. So Lothar's ex-wife is mentioned. We see Dale at the end of issue 4 with her body, and then her essence or her spirit from the computer is back as well. But there's no mention of the Phantom's wife. Jeddah had to have a mum, and we haven't seen any mention of Narda.
Was she ever in the Defenders of the Earth? Like I know she
No.
was in the one by the other company, but was she actually in the cartoon?
No, and neither was, from memory, Lothar's ex-wife wasn't mentioned either. It'll be interesting to see if they come around as well.
I don't
Actually,
think it needs more characters.
Yeah,
yeah. I thought that was an interesting take because I remember from the cartoons it was they were able to save Dale's essence in that crystal or whatever, and then Rick was able to get her into the computer, into Dynac X. But this one, it seems that, yes, she got into some sort of crystal somehow, and she's worked her own way into Dynac X, so it's all come as a bit of a surprise. So, yeah, I thought that was a different take on it.
I do like the idea of Dale's body. I think it's safe to say they're going to eventually, re-merged. But I wonder if that's going to be the way for the Phantom. Once they've done that to Dale, they can possibly also do that with the Phantom as well.
That
That's
makes
a bit
sense.
of a sneak of how they're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you're able to do it with one, you should be able to do it with the other. But yeah, so we still haven't seen the Phantom's body yet. So I reckon that's the old. And you're talking about limits of Mandrake's magic. Well, the limit is he can't tell you how the way he's doing it because as soon as he tells you, the magic's over. He's no power or the spell ends.
Yeah, interesting.
The only thing I found interesting in here, and I'm kind of curious how they're going to play it off, is I can't remember her name now, but Crotan's sister, that whole
Oh, yes.
will they, won't they temptation thing with Flash Gordon, like we had that, and that was like a bigger part of issue 3, and now issue 4. Dale Arden's back. It was just something in the air because it seemed like also, I think at the end of issue 2, they teased Crotan's sister and she was like, I got the suggestion that she was manipulating things behind the scenes, that she could manipulate Flash somehow. So I want to know if that's going to come around or play into this, or if the ultimate plan in the next 4 issues is to weave all of this stuff together with the Phantom, and Kit and Kurt, their rivalry, and whatever Crotan's doing under one big neat bow. Because that was kind of like the essence of the cartoon, is like Ming was behind everything. Even when Kurt Walker first shows up and gets his powers, it's because Ming's behind the scenes. Like, oh yeah, I'm tired of this Phantom guy. I need someone to take care of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Princess Castra, yeah, she seems like a real manipulative little. What's a nice word you can say without getting into trouble?
Without getting cancelled, Steve. One of the things that I also noticed, I think it was in the first issue with that, is I think you raised in your review as well, Scott, is in one panel she was white and then in the other panel she was green. Now we're seeing her as green. Does Flash see her as green, or do you remember that panel, Scott?
Yeah. Now that you mention, I do remember that, and I have no idea because they've never really revisited that. We don't really know what's going on there. It's just something that was teased, and then we moved on to something else.
And the other one that we haven't seen for a little while is Kashima as well. We saw him, the first couple of issues when he was barring Rick from seeing Flash.
He's probably had the less airtime of anyone.
Hmm.
And LJ and Jeddah haven't had that much either. But yeah, Kashin doesn't have much. Because Kashin was always with
Mandrake.
Zuffy as well. And with Mandrake, yeah.
Yeah.
Kashin is Kagan.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Mad Cave Studio standalone Phantom series. Would you like to see the Phantom standalone series outside the Defenders of the Earth arc? Simple yes or no. Yes for Dan?
Yes, outside defenses, yes. 21 Phantom.
Yes.
For me, it's a yes, but I would also like to see the Defenders of the Earth kind of continuing. Dan, we already know that you are not my Phantom, so putting your hashtag aside, do you like the series? What do you like and do not like? And then we'll get everyone's final thoughts on that.
Yeah, I still like it. And I'm very much looking forward to reading the last 4 stages. You use the word fuddy-duddy and focus and that sort of thing. You can get set in your ways as to what you expect the character to be. And if no one ever explores the edges or breaks the mold of that, then you're probably just reading the same sort of stories forever and a day. So I don't mind those things being tested. This is certainly not, so far, my favorite depiction of the Phantom, but as a story, as a Defenders of the Earth story and a Flash Gordon story, I am enjoying it. So, and there's enough little Easter eggs and shout outs to the animated series and all the rest of it that it's certainly keeping me thoroughly entertained. So, yeah, happy for it to continue, of course.
Yeah, I do like it overall. I love the action beat. Overall, I do enjoy the characters. The only real thing that's my hang up is I just feel like there's too much kind of compacted in this 8-issue story, and I feel like it kind of topples over each other a little bit and confuses things and kind of cuts beats that maybe would have normally hit or landed in a different way. But other than that, like I'm looking forward to reading the rest, seeing where it goes.
Probably going to agree with you all. Enjoying the series, but there are a couple of gripes. Like the Council of Phantoms I didn't like the way that was handled, and I've already mentioned that. They've still got another 4 issues to go, and I think with an 8-part series, there are going to be bits that are going to be left hanging here at part 4, which you expect to be tied up by part 8. So at the moment, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying it, particularly like Dan said, from a not my fan perspective. Like you remember, it's not number 21. It's you got Flash Gordon doing well. You've got actually he's coming good now. He was a bit off with the fairies there for a little bit, but that was an interesting plot point. Mandrake is being great. Rick has been great. These characters that they're focusing on have been really good. But the issue is how you can get these 8 and even more, 10 or 11, 12, including the bad guys and everyone else going in, really getting enough airtime and keeping the story along.
What about you, Jim?
I'm on the fence. I think the Council of the Phantom I think there's a twist with it. Maybe I'm hoping that there's a twist because I haven't liked what I've seen so far. So maybe it's me hoping that I'll like what I see. I've kind of gone through moments like I enjoyed the first 1, 2, and then the third one, not so much, and like for instance, one of the things that I did like, and this is why I'm thinking there's a twist, is when we see the Phantom shooting someone and we're like, hey, what's going on here? And then it's like, oh, it's Kurt. So the fact that, and then we even saw the Sing Pirate say, hey, why are you killing us? You're not supposed to be killing. That's not what the Phantom does. And then, we kind of learn that it's not the Phantom. And that's why I think Dan does understand enough about the Phantom to be able to do something like that. So I'm hoping that it is a red herring, that, that are trying to fool us. Now, with the artwork, I like the artwork in some areas. Like the artwork definitely matches the story, like with the grittiness. And, it is a grittier read. It's it's definitely like an M movie in a sense. Like, there's a lot of shadows, there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of angry faces.
Yeah, no issues with the artwork. I think, like you said, suits the story well. There's probably a couple of times you think, oh, that's a little bit off, but I think it's good. Good without being mind-blowing.
So, Steve, what do you think will happen? Projecting, this is your chance to put on your writers, fans, Mandrake hat.
Got to have the good guys win. They'll uncover who's behind it all. Is Ming truly dead, or is he still there somehow? His essence still floating around. So I think they'll uncover the truth behind what's going on. I don't think they'll reconnect the spirit phantom with body phantom, but Jeddah will see the light, and Jeddah will take the reins as the new phantom.
I agree that Jetta's going to have more of a role. I could probably see her and we'll say our Phantom in a mentor-mentee relationship, maybe, kind of like almost like a
Like the
Luke
movie.
Skywalker and Obi-Wan or something. But the one thing I am wondering if Crotan is really Crotan is kind of like the big thing I'm guessing. I'm wondering if like we saw that body device with Dale Arden and putting her, the tease of putting her consciousness back in that body. I'm wondering if the same thing could be used to take a living, breathing body and put someone else's consciousness in there, and wondering if Crotan is actually Ming, because I feel like
Ooh,
he's
what a
such the
twist.
epicenter of the cartoon that maybe that's where this is leading, and that's going to be the big shocking reveal at issue 8 is it was Ming all along, and Princess Castra, is just working for her dad. Other than
Yeah.
that, I don't see too much else. I mean, obviously, I feel like they're also establishing the new base of operations possibly in the Seven Nations. Mandrake put it in his pocket. They're going that way. Maybe we'll see the foundation of the Defenders permanently like planted down there, and that's kind of going to help the Phantom with him missing his home and being back in Africa, even though it's kind of weird to say that because Africa is such a huge continent. We don't really have the geography of where this is versus the Phantom's home and everything.
Yeah, I like the creativity to be able to foresee where this is going, and it's moved in such weird directions that it's hard to see. I like the thoughts of both Steve and Scott there, some sort of combination there. I guess my focus, of course, has always been on the Phantom and his particular story arc. Kurt needs to be disposed of somehow, and the way that they try and restore the Phantom's legacy after Kurt's had however long it's been, 4 years or more or less or thereabouts, going around shooting bad guys. How do you get the Phantom's true legacy to come back? There's a lot of work there, and maybe that concept of the 27th Phantom as a ghost being the mentor for Jeddah as the, what are we up to, 29th Phantom or whatever it might be, is the way to go.
What's the prince's name? Is it Crotan?
Crotan, yeah.
Crotan. I don't think he's actually the bad guy. So like I agree that he seems to be very obvious as the bad guy. Now, I wonder if maybe there's a reason why we haven't seen much of Kashin, and maybe he's going to be the bad guy.
Well, like they did to Orko in the Masters of the Universe revelation that they did a year or two
I just
ago.
think there's going to be a twist of the bad guy, and I think Ming is very obvious. Crotan, he's very obvious as the bad guy. Could it be Castra, the princess? But could there be a real twist that it could be Kashin? Maybe he's played the long game. Yeah, that's what I think will happen. Is that there's a twist that none of us will predict.
Well,
Which means everything we just talked about for the last 10 minutes is null and void.
Well, there'd need to be a real solid explanation of that, because for him to turn from being Mandrake's ward into the big bad would be an abrupt turn. But look, at the end of the day, Mandrake is the get out of jail free card. He could probably just fold him up and put him in his pocket. So story over.
Well, thank you, Scott, for joining us. Thank you for joining us for your first podcast with us. Hopefully you will join us again, and we look forward to your other reviews. Steve, Dan, thank you as always. Listeners, thank you for listening and or watching us. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and our email is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. We would love to hear your thoughts, feedback and opinions on this episode, but also on this series as well. You can leave your feedback on our social media platforms or over at our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favorite podcast apps, including iTunes or Spotify. Thank you. Please get in contact with us. And for myself, happy phantoming.
Happy
Phantoming, everyone.
Happy fattening.
Got in under an hour.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die." The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom. Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds